Hi, everybody. The topic for today's Knowledge Nugget is change management. Now, change, that can be a pretty big topic for a lot, especially when it comes to change management. Do you know that if you were to do a Google search for change management models, you would easily find 12, 13, 14 models out there available. So it can be confusing in terms of which one you need to consider to use depending on what's going on with your organization. Well, today there's one model in particular that I want to go ahead and be discussing with you. So to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and share a few slides with you. So let me just go ahead and get that pulled up right now. All right, so let's get started. So take a look at a couple of quotes that you're going to see here. The first one on your left. Change is hard because people overestimate the value of what they have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. How true is that? I know that happens to everybody, it seems like, regardless of if the change is taking place in their organization or in their personal life. And let's go ahead and take a look at the quote here on your right-hand side. Starting something new or making a big change requires courage, motivation, and persistence. Worry and doubt will only slow you down. Worry and doubt will only slow you down, but that's what seems to occur the most when change is happening. And we all know that change is inevitable. So if we know it's inevitable, why is it so hard to accept? Well, that's going to get me right into the change management model that we're going to be discussing today. Some of you may know this as the 5 stages of grief. Now, in particular, this particular model is called the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. Now, research was done in regards to patients that were terminally ill and they were suffering with cancer. So that's what this model was first based on. Now, although it was in the healthcare setting, actually this applies even within organizations, because after all, when we're talking about change in organizations, it comes down to an individual level. So that's what I want you to be thinking about as a leader. Think about the people that you're leading through the change and what they're going through. With that being said, let's take a look at the very first stage here, which is going to be denial. You can see some keywords that happen to pop up. Avoidance, confusion, elation, shock, and fear. So that's one stage of the Kubler-Ross grief cycle that we'll be talking about. What's another stage? Well, anger, frustration, irritation, and anxiety. Not a comfortable state to be in by any means. Another stage, depression, the sense of being overwhelmed, helplessness. There's hostility that could take place, even flight. Another stage, bargaining. This person's getting a little bit closer of going through and getting to the other side. So what is that going to entail? Struggling to find meaning, reaching out to others, and telling one story. Last but not least, acceptance. This person is going to be exploring options, a new plan in place, and moving on. Now, anyone that's going to be going through these different stages, they're going to require different support. So that's why it's important for you as a leader to understand what's needed in each one of these stages. Now, before we take a look at this line across the bottom, I want you to think about this though. I don't want this to come across as these stages being linear. It's not like an individual is going to be starting on the left immediately and go into denial as soon as a change is occurring. And I'm not going to say that they're going to go from denial to anger to depression. That's not what I'm saying at all. As a matter of fact, it's quite common for folks to possibly go ahead and start with anger, then go to bargaining. Maybe they even make it to acceptance, but then they're going to backslide into depression. The main point here is that people could be cycling through all of these different stages. And just because they get to a point of acceptance doesn't mean that they can't turn around and go back to another stage. But what's important for you as a leader to recognize which stage that person is in And then you can take a look here at the bottom and see what's needed. All right, so if someone happens to be in denial or anger, what they're going to need in those particular stages, information, communication. So give them as much context as possible when you know that that individual happens to be in those couple of particular stages. If someone happens to be going through the stage of depression, it's very important to give that individual emotional support. Then, as the person happens to go towards the other stages around bargaining or acceptance, you can see what's needed there, and that's guidance and direction. So once again, it's important to realize that there are a lot of different components here with this. Change can be tough. It can be very emotional. And in particular, let's think about some major stresses that do occur in life. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to bring up here is just an example of what can take place when change occurs, whether it's going to be leadership changes, mergers and acquisitions, potential layoffs. These are some things just to say that, hey, you could have a certain percent that would be in denial, another percent in bargaining, or you just have one big bucket right there that's going to be cycling through all of them. But now at least you know what's needed with each one of those stages. So when we talk about some of the major life stresses, there's a lot to consider. So individuals may not just be dealing with that particular organizational change that we just mentioned, whether it's going to be change in leadership, merger and acquisition, potential layoffs, restructuring, downsizing. In addition to that, there could be other things taking place with these individuals. Death or serious illness of a family member or a friend. They may be moving their residence. They could be worried about being fired or laid off. And maybe it's not them. It could be their spouse that's taking issues with that. It could be them having to worry and struggle about the financial crisis or problems of paying bills, troubles with a boss or coworker, separation, divorce, marriage, breakup. There's so many different aspects. And then also either them or someone they know being a victim of a violent crime. Now, that being said, you can take a look at all of these major life stresses. Perhaps an individual suffering from one of these, perhaps more than that. But when an organizational change happens to occur as well, that means you could just take a look at the one circled. It could compound that even more. So maybe someone happens to be dealing with a family member that has a serious illness, and now if there happens to be a merger, acquisition, restructuring, now this individual may have to go ahead and pick up and move and worry about all of those additional stresses. They could then also be worrying about paying their bills and being concerned with a financial crisis. So that's why it's so important to be looking at this on an individual level and what's necessary when it comes to change. Empathy is going to be key because that's what individuals need when they're really struggling throughout any of these stresses. Now, this is a really important question for you to be asking the individuals that you're leading through change. What do you have control over during times of change and uncertainty? Now, individuals may not necessarily be able to control an action that's occurring. However, the one thing that they can control is going to be their reaction to that. And that's why it's so important for you as the leader to help empower them, help them see what they would be able to do and support themselves through that. So here's some key takeaways when it comes to leading change, especially when it comes to doing so with individuals. Number one, have empathy throughout the entire process. As you can see, there's a lot of stresses that can be taking place, and that's why it's important for you to be able to extend that to your team. Perhaps it's something that you are aware about first, so you've had some time to adjust to the idea of the change, but now you're having to turn around and lead those others. So please have some empathy as you're going through that. The next, support those individuals in each one of those 5 stages as they're cycling through that. It's very important. So for example, you may be needing to give information at one point, and then ultimately emotional support or turning around and providing guidance. And then last, empower those individuals. I hope this helps and gives you some additional insights when it comes to change management. We'll cover more on the next one in regards to empowering individuals, specifically when it comes to personal accountability and what they can do during those times of change. Thank you.